So as you're creating extraction logic within Ephesoft and setting up your batch class to properly extract information from the specific distribution of data that you have in your documents, you may occasionally run into instances where, in spite of what appears to be on the page to what's visually apparent, the extraction logic might be failing. And so today I want to show you a quick technique that will help you build more intelligent regular expressions to pull out information from documents that might have variation in the data that can't necessarily be seen by human eyes. So I'll show you this lineup I have of example documents in just a minute, and then after that we'll throw it into a batch class that I have set up in Ephesoft, and we'll just go through a quick progression of building up regular expressions that'll pull out a specific field from those documents. So let's take a look. These are the first pages of some directional surveys. I'm going to just scrub through these real quick. There is a parameter or a piece of data within each of these called the API number. It's not really important what that is, but we know it shows up like this. API number is going to be our key. The value is going to be this series of numbers. It's always going to be 2-3-5. That refers to the number of digits after each. And there could be a few different ways that that key shows up. Here it's API NO with a period. Looks like it's that way too. We're seeing that pretty convincingly as a pattern, so what we'll start with will be a key that looks like this, and we'll do that in just a sec. So the first thing I'm going to do to begin building extraction logic to pull that API number out of these documents is to take this whole batch of documents, these images, copy them, and we're going to throw them into the test extraction area for this batch class. So this is just a simple test batch class I set up. The ID here is BC18, so we're going to go out to the Ephesoft shared folder. Here's BC18 test extraction. We're going to paste those images in there, so they're waiting to be actioned upon there. And here we are in BC18. We'll drill into this document type I've set up. We're going to clear this out, so I'll delete that. We're going to start a brand new key value listing. This is going to be API number. This is a string. No pattern for this. And I believe that'll be all we need here. Okay. Apply. And then we'll set up our first key value pair. So the key that we saw looks something like this. We'll validate that. And then this is going to be 2 digits, dash, followed by 3 digits, and dash, followed by 5 digits. That's going to be a stable pattern, so we'll leave that as it is. There's no reason to put any variation into this as yet. The location is going to be to the right of the key, so we're going to mark this as such, and that should do it. So I'll back out here, I'll hit apply again just to be safe, and then we'll do test KV. What this is doing now, if we go back into our test extraction folder, we'll see changes start to show up here. Ephesoft is actually now beginning to make renditions of these images in the right format so that it can begin running the RecoStar full page read process, and it's going to generate XML documents that contain all the OCR values that Ephesoft initially sees in these images. So I'm going to stop this clip for the moment. This is going to continue running, and I'll pick it back up when this initial processing of the images is done. Just so you know, this doesn't happen every time. It only happens when you change the batch of files that's in this test extraction folder. So after we finish this initial processing, further testing of new extraction logic should be very quick. Okay, the initial test is done. We see that each of these images now is paired with a couple of different files that Ephesoft generated during the RecoStar processing. We have XML and then a couple of database files here. We're not going to pay attention to these, but the XML will be useful in just a minute, and of course the TIFFs here are going to be our visual guides. So let's look at how the first test went. These look great. Looks like we're pulling valid API numbers here from maybe about half of the documents. It's not a bad first try. So down this left column here we have listed out the specific file that Ephesoft is reading from. And that's great because all we need to do is open these up and see what's different in these particular cases. So we'll start with image 1, which will be at the top of the page here. We can just open this up, and it looks like here the key actually is a £. So we'll close that and close this, and we'll edit this. This is just some basic regex here, so we'll add a pipe for OR, and then this will be API, and then £, we'll validate that, hit OK, go back, and test again. Now we're getting something for image 1, so that's great. We may have gotten several other hits on that. It looks like, yeah, there are just 2 of these left. So let's take a look here at image 10, here at the bottom. We'll open this up. Okay, this one could be a challenge since this is handwritten. We're going to come back to this example. I'll close this. The other one missing here is image 2. So let's look at image 2. Okay, so here looks like there's a colon. That's going to be my first guess. So we're going to add that into our key value listing here. Close this and edit down here. Edit. So let's look at that again. That was a colon, right? API no dot colon. Okay. API no dot colon. Try that. Oh, and of course we need to escape this because else a dot in regex is going to stand for any character. In fact, I should have done that here too if I was paying attention. That should still work fine. We'll back this up, test again. Whoops, I must have messed something up there. Let's try this again. Let's not escape that. Back it up, test again. That looks better. Okay, so we're still not getting image 2. And this is where a different technique comes in. I'll go ahead and make these changes persist for the time being by hitting apply. Now, looking at the image for image 2, it looks like what we have here is exactly what I put into the key value pair. But we can get a much better view on this if we open up the actual XML for image 2. So I'll open this up in Sublime, and we'll do a text search for API. Oh, that's interesting. So I searched for API, but what came up is APL. So we'll pause here just for a second, look overall at what these XML files look like. These are especially useful to get familiar with because these will show up both in the test suite that we're using right now, and when Ephesoft processes an actual batch, you'll see these same paired XML files get generated alongside each page, which corresponds to each image of the documents that you feed in. So what you're looking at here is going to be very similar to what you'll see in the XML files that get paired with a live batch. So I'm going to scroll to the top here. This is just an XML file that contains a bunch of values. All of these are, once you get out of this initial kind of header information, basically what we're looking at are a series of encapsulated structured values that contain all the OCR characters that RicoStar recognized on this page. So, for instance, here's a K and an I, and it thinks that this is one discrete value. It's probably separated either by spaces or some other characters that denote breaks in the word, or breaks in the value to the OCR engine. And then within the same node here, within the same part of the tree, there are X and Y extent coordinates that lay out essentially this value. It lays it out at a particular location and size and extent on a 2D coordinate plane. So that's most of the document. If we scroll to the very bottom, though, we'll see something a little bit different. This is the HOCR content tag. You'll see this at the bottom of every XML file that RicoStar generates, and this is really useful because unlike these 2D coordinate values that are laid out in this structured way, which are somewhat difficult to understand from the perspective of a human reading through these values, this content is going to much more closely match the general feel of the content on the page. This basically represents the sum total of all the values that are above it, all listed out in a sequential fashion. So we're going to look again here for API, and just like before, the value that we saw up here in this section, down here we see the same APL instead of API. So it looks like what's happening, if we look at this document, it's reading this character right here as a lowercase l, and that's totally understandable. It really would be difficult to parse either way. It could be an uppercase I or a lowercase l. So this is an example of some variability that you'll get in the data if the image that you feed into RicoStar, into Ephesoft, has content in it that's ambiguous. We can't rely 100% on the well-formed key or form of our key for this extraction rule, because occasionally we might get results that look just like this. So let's drop out of here and we'll add this to our key, and we'll do it, let's see, so it's APL space NO period. So lowercase l, lowercase p, NO period. That should work. So just double checking here, that looks good. If we rerun this now, we should expect to get a hit on image 2. And in fact, we do. There it is. So that's an example of how drilling into the XML file is really useful for expanding the tolerance in your key value pairs, in your regexes in general, to accommodate some variability and in some cases some ambiguous or faulty extraction. The specific tolerances that your purposes will tolerate obviously are going to differ from use case to use case. If we scroll to the bottom here, we'll see that image 10 is still missing. So remember, image 10 was the one that had that handwritten API number. And if I look at this, I might expect that API number itself is getting extracted properly, but there's no telling what happened here. So to figure out, what would otherwise be a mystery, we'll just drill into, again, the XML file associated with image 10. And we'll look for API number. And so this brings us to this series of values that looks pretty disjointed. I'm going to search for the next hit here, and it should take me down to, whoops, let's get rid of those brackets. It should take me down to the HOCR content section. So what we see here is that API number begins, and then really that handwritten section didn't get extracted too well. I don't think that there's really any hope of getting an automated extraction on that piece of data that's going to be well formed. And so, again, drilling into this XML file saves us some trouble, because rather than endlessly tweaking our regex, our key value pair, to try to accommodate this piece of data, we can just look directly at what Ephesoft is seeing internally and conclude that maybe this document is a lost cause. So there you have it. That, in a nutshell, is a technique that we have come to use fairly frequently to inform the development of automated extraction logic. And we've had good luck with this process, refining those key value pairs and those regex statements to accommodate a pretty high degree of variability and sometimes ambiguity in the data that we've set up and extracted for our clients. So this can be particularly useful sometimes when the incoming data has variable image quality. You can have the same two documents that have the same two keys in the sense of a key value pair, but if the latter document has a lower resolution or a lower scan quality, the rendered OCR value for that key can be substantially different, and so you'd want to tweak your key value pair and your regex, your regular expressions, to accommodate that variation in the rendering of OCR data as a result of varying image quality. As a final note, I would just like to point out that as we saw in the test extraction area, where these sequenced image renditions are all paired with a couple of database files and an XML file, this exact same file structure will result if you zoom out a little bit and go, rather than into one of these batch class folders, actually into the Ephesoft system folder. These are all of the batch instances. Here you'll find all of the batch instances that you're processing at any given time, either that are still in process or have yet to be completed. And so if you drill into any one of these, you'll in fact see something very similar. And so this, this is a page in a document, and this is the XML that comes with it, and this is in a live batch instance. So if I happen to see unexpected results in the extraction when processing a live batch, as opposed to the test phase as we've been doing, again, I would just go back in here, open up, this document, just like we did before, and look through here and try to figure out what might be the cause of, a missed key value hit or something to that effect. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of how to explore and utilize the somewhat open file architecture of Ephesoft to kind of peek under the hood and develop a much better set of regular expressions and extraction logic to get at the data that you're trying to capture from your documents.